Om Sri Saram. Good morning, Saram to one and all. Today we are discussing about NIOS PUC Indian history. So we are discussing about introduction of Indian history. History is one of the greatest branches of human knowledge. The term history has been derived from Greek word historia, which means inquiry or investigation. The Greeks were the first to evolve the art of writing history as a scientific discipline. Herodotus, a Greek historian, is believed to have initiated the writing of history, and hence he has been regarded as the father of history. Generally, history is the study of past events. It helps us to understand early humans to successfully conquer their environment and develop the present day civilization. It is not just a study of battles and kings, as is normally understood by some. It is an analysis of society, economy, and cultural trends over a long period as reflected in available sources. A historian tries to evaluate different situations over a long period and ask questions as to why certain events happened and what was their impact on society at large. Totally, various historians have defined history in different angles. So, according to Herodotus, history is a record of great heroes and unique events to be remembered by future generations. And one more historian, according to Karl Marx, history is a story of struggle between haves and have not. Another J.B. Bury defined history. History is a science, no less and no more. So, every new evidence or a fresh interpretation of existing evidence by different scholars helps in enriching our knowledge about the past. So, according to Jawaharlal Nehru, history is the story of man from uncivilization to civilization. A historian differentiates between fact and fiction. However, myths which are based on oral tradition of a society may contain memories of past happening. The historian's job is to ascertain the fact through cross-checking of different historical evidence. In this lesson, we will learn how India's ancient past was constructed with the help of large varieties of historical evidence and their interpretation. A historian needs source material to reconstruct the past, but sources themselves do not reveal the past. So, historians try to reconstruct the past based on available sources. Hence, no sources, no history. Discovery, collection, and interpretation of sources are the greatest challenges to the historian. They need interpretation, and the historian makes them speak. In fact, the historian is expected to track the sources, read text, ask relevant questions, cross check evidence to offer meaningful explanation. For example, in 1826, Charles Mason noticed the high wall and towers of an old settlement in Arappa village of eastern Punjab, now in Pakistan. And 5 decades later, Sir Alexander Cunningham collected some seals from the site, but it took archaeologist John Marshall another 50 years to identify the oldest civilization in the Indus region. We shall offer another example regarding the historian's task to cross-check different types of evidence. Now, where in the source pertaining to King Harsha do we find a mention of his defeat at the hands of Chalukya ruler Pulakesi II. But the inscription of Pulakesi II claimed a victory over Harsha. In this case, it is obvious that Harsha's biographer Banabhatta, who wrote Harshacharita, deliberately did not mention the defeat of his patron. And one more best example, unknown Greek author writing work known as the Periples of the Erythraean Sea. The literal meaning of Ityasa is thus it was, and it is translated as story. There was the time when only written records were acknowledged as authentic sources of story. The deep knowledge of Indian tradition and culture is also essential. So, story is classified into prehistoric period and historic period based on the sources available to reconstruct it. The period where the written records are not available is known as prehistoric period. Written records are not available is known as prehistoric period, and when we get written records is known as historic period. So the sources of story can be classified into two groups. First one, archaeological sources. Second one, literary sources. So written material could be verified, cited, and cross-checked. Oral evidence, myth, and folk songs was never considered a valid source. So earlier historians used myth, fiction, and oral tradition in a limited way on account of their lack of authenticity and verifiability. But today, these unconventional sources are being used innovatively. Traditions and cultural ties should be studied in the light of other historical facts. For example, the Mahabharata consisted 18 parvas. It is a story of conflict between two sets of warring cousins. One is not sure whether there was a real war as narrated in the epic. Some historians believe that the war did happen, while others wait for corroborative evidence for the event. The original story was probably composed by bards known as sutas, who generally accompanied Kshatriya warriors to the battlefield and recited poems in the praises of victories and other achievements of their heroes. These compositions were circulated orally and preserved as part of human memory. Totally, the study of Indian history is very essential to mankind because as memory is to man, history is to mankind. So, India's religious tolerance is the only way for the survival of mankind because great personalities are no more, but history and autobiography of such personalities are still there. So, history is a treasure of noble ideal and is a light to show the right path, and it removes prejudices. Totally, according to Dr. B. R. Ambedkar, those who forget history cannot create history. So, thank you everyone. Today class is over. Again, next class. Once again, we have meet. Saram to one and all. Jai Sai Ram.